the storm inside the mansion. "Let them talk," Gabriel said quietly, setting the phone on the counter. "Mother, the only people whose opinions matter are standing right here." Patricia's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't be serious, Gabriel. Do you have any idea what this will do to you? To the company? To our name? The board members are already asking questions about your personal life. If they find out you're involved with a maid—" Emma flinched at the word and Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Her name is Emma, and she's not just a maid. She's the woman I love." Patricia's perfectly painted lips trembled with anger. "Love? You think you know what love is? Love doesn't come from pity or attraction to someone beneath you. It comes from your equals, people who can stand beside you in public without lowering you." Gabriel took Emma's hand. "Then maybe I don't want to stand in that kind of public. Maybe I'd rather stand with someone who makes me feel alive." For a moment, Patricia said nothing. The ticking clock on the wall filled the silence. Then she straightened her shoulders. "If you insist on continuing this mistake, then you do it without my support. You'll lose everything I've built for you." "I built my company myself, Mother," Gabriel said softly but firmly. "You didn't write a single line of code, you didn't take the risk, and you didn't sit up for nights trying to make something out of nothing. I love you, but I won't let you control my happiness." Patricia's eyes softened just for a second, perhaps a flicker of realization that her son had grown into his own man. But the moment passed as quickly as it came. "Then you've made your choice," she said coldly, turning toward the door. "When you come to your senses, don't expect me to be waiting." She left the kitchen, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. The sound faded, leaving a silence so heavy it felt physical. Emma's throat tightened. "Gabriel, maybe she's right. Maybe this is too much. I don't want to cause a rift between you and your family." Gabriel turned to her, taking both her hands again. "Emma, listen to me. You didn't cause this. My mother's world is built on appearances. Mine isn't. I've spent years living the way she wanted. Maybe it's time I start living for myself." Emma blinked back tears. She wanted to believe him, every word of it, but part of her heart was trembling with fear. She knew love was powerful, but she also knew how cruel society could be, and she had seen enough of life to know that sometimes love alone wasn't enough to silence the world's judgment. Still, as Gabriel's fingers intertwined with hers, warmth replaced her fear. "If you're sure," she whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said, his eyes steady. "We'll take it one step at a time, together." That night, after Patricia stormed out of the house, Gabriel took Emma to the rooftop terrace overlooking the glittering city. The lights of San Francisco spread below them like fallen stars, the air cool and filled with the hum of distant traffic. Emma stood beside him, wrapped in one of his jackets, the scent of his cologne mingling with the evening breeze. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly, his gaze on the skyline. "Regret telling you the truth? Never," she said softly. "Even if it cost me everything, I'd still rather be honest." Gabriel smiled faintly. "That's one of the things I admire about you." "You're brave," Emma let out a soft laugh. "I'm terrified." "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he replied. "It's doing what's right despite it." For a long time they stood there, watching the city together. Emma thought of her mother, how she had spent her life working in other people's homes, dreaming of better days for her daughter. She wondered what her mother would say if she knew Emma was standing here now, hand in hand with the man she loved, defying the odds of class and status. She could almost hear her mother's voice. "Follow your heart, Micha, but don't lose yourself." When Gabriel wrapped his arm around her shoulders, Emma leaned into him, feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't known she was missing all her life. Hours later, after they said goodnight, Emma lay awake in her small room. Her heart was full yet uneasy. Love had bloomed in the most impossible place, but could it survive the storm that was surely coming? The next morning, the air in the mansion felt heavier. Patricia had left for the family estate in Napa, but her presence lingered like a shadow. Some of the staff avoided eye contact, whispering quietly among themselves. Emma could feel their curiosity, their judgment, even their sympathy. She tried to focus on her work, polishing silverware and arranging flowers, but her thoughts drifted constantly to Gabriel. By midday, Gabriel appeared in the kitchen holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You're working too hard," he said, handing one to her. She smiled shyly. "Old habits. It feels strange not to." He leaned against the counter, watching her. "Then maybe it's time to break a few habits. I was thinking, you don't have to keep working here. You could come work with me. There's a position in my company, assistant project coordinator. It's challenging, but I'll train you myself." Emma's eyes widened. "Gabriel, I can't. People will think you only hired me because I love you?" He interrupted gently. "Let them think what they want. You're already taking business courses. You're smart, capable, and you deserve better than cleaning up after people who don't see your worth." Her heart swelled at his faith in her, yet she hesitated. "I just don't want anyone saying I used you." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then prove them wrong. Show them what you can do." That afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, Emma filled out the employment forms Gabriel had printed for her. It felt surreal, like stepping through an invisible barrier into a new world. For the first time, she wasn't just the maid. She was a woman with a future. The following days passed in a blur of nervous excitement. Gabriel introduced her to his team discreetly, presenting her as a bright new trainee. He avoided public displays of affection, determined to keep things professional, but the warmth in his voice when he said her name, the secret glances they shared in meetings, those were enough to keep Emma's heart alight. But not everyone was as welcoming. A few senior employees, loyal to Patricia's social circle, began whispering behind closed doors. "Did you hear she used to clean his house? Imagine what she must have done to get that job." "She won't last a month," Emma heard the whispers, though she pretended not to. Instead, she threw herself into her work, arriving early, staying late, studying project files, and asking thoughtful questions. Gabriel watched her progress quietly, pride glinting in his eyes every time she presented her ideas. One evening, after everyone had gone home, Gabriel walked into the conference room where Emma was still working. Papers were spread across the table, her notebook full of notes and diagrams. She looked up, startled. "I didn't realize how late it was," he smiled. "You're turning into me." "That's dangerous," she laughed softly. "I guess I just want to prove that I belong here." "You already do," he said, his tone warm. "You've impressed everyone who matters." Emma met his gaze, searching for reassurance. "Do you think your mother will ever accept us?" Gabriel hesitated before answering. "I don't know. But I do know I won't let her dictate my heart." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm proud of you, Emma, for your courage, for your hard work, for the way you keep your head high no matter what." Her heart fluttered. "You make it easier," he smiled, leaning closer until his forehead touched hers. "Then maybe we're helping each other." For a moment, the world disappeared. The papers, the gossip, the barriers. There was only the quiet rhythm of 2 hearts that had found each other across an impossible divide. That weekend, Gabriel invited Emma to join him for a charity gala, an event his mother had once insisted he attend with a suitable companion. Emma hesitated. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" he asked gently. "Because those people, they'll judge me before I even walk through the door." "Then let them," he said. "You don't need their approval. You belong anywhere you choose to stand." When the night arrived, Gabriel waited downstairs in a black tuxedo, his tie matching the deep blue of Emma's evening gown. She had never worn anything so beautiful. The satin fabric shimmered as she moved, her hair pinned elegantly at the back. Gabriel's breath caught when he saw her. "You look extraordinary," she smiled nervously. "You're biased." "Maybe," he said, taking her hand. "But I'm right." At the gala, whispers followed them like a trail. Patricia was there too, surrounded by her social circle, her face stiff when she saw them. Emma kept her chin high, remembering Gabriel's words. Throughout the night, she carried herself with quiet dignity, her poise silencing many of the murmurs. When one woman made a pointed remark about domestic help dressing above her station, Gabriel simply smiled and replied, "That woman happens to be smarter than most CEOs in this room." Later, When they stepped onto the balcony for some air, Emma looked at him with tearful eyes. "Thank you for standing up for me." He squeezed her hand. "I'll always stand up for you." From that night onward, Emma's name began to mean something different in the whispers. No longer the maid who overreached, but the woman who carried herself with grace and earned respect one step at a time. Yet beneath the happiness, trouble still brewed. Patricia wasn't finished. In the quiet corners of her world, she was already making calls to lawyers, to journalists, to anyone who could make this inconvenient love story disappear. And as Emma and Gabriel drove home beneath the city's glowing lights, unaware of the storm gathering around them, they held hands tightly, believing for just that night that love really was enough. The price of love. The days after the charity gala shimmered with a strange calm, the kind that hides the coming storm. On the surface, everything appeared normal. Gabriel still left early for the office. Emma still arrived before sunrise to help. The remaining staff and Patricia Westwood had returned to the family estate in Napa as if nothing had happened. But beneath that calm, something unseen was shifting. Every time Emma's phone buzzed, she felt a tremor of dread. Every time Gabriel's assistant came in with a stack of documents, his chest tightened, waiting for bad news to appear among the pages. It came on a Thursday morning. Gabriel was in the middle of a board meeting when his phone vibrated. The message was short. 6 words that drained the color from his face. Tabloid running story on maid affair. He excused himself, walked into the hallway, and clicked the link. His heart sank. On the screen was a glossy article with photographs from the gala, Emma at his side, the headline screaming, "Tech Millionaire's Secret Romance with His Housekeeper Exposed." The article was cruel, filled with insinuations about Emma's motives and Gabriel's judgment, painting her as a schemer who had climbed her way into luxury. The comments below were worse, strangers dissecting her appearance, her background, her worth. By the time he drove home, Emma had already seen it. She sat on the edge of her bed, the phone trembling in her hand, tears spilling down her cheeks. She had never felt so humiliated. Every kind word, every smile they had shared now twisted into mockery under the harsh light of gossip. When Gabriel entered, she stood quickly, trying to wipe her face. "Emma?" His voice broke. "I just saw it. I'm so sorry." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "They're saying terrible things. About me, about us. Gabriel, my mother called crying. She saw it on television. Reporters came to her building asking questions." Gabriel crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "I'll fix this. I'll handle it." "How?" she whispered. "How do you fix lies that everyone wants to believe?" "By standing together," he said firmly. "By not hiding." But even as he spoke, he knew it wouldn't be easy. That evening, his company's public relations team urged him to issue a statement denying the relationship. Investors were worried, shareholders were restless. "It's just optics," they said. "Distance yourself for a while until it dies down." Gabriel refused. "I won't lie," he told them, "and I won't treat the woman I love like a scandal." For Emma, the days that followed were a blur of flashes, microphones, and unwanted attention. Paparazzi camped outside the mansion, gates. Gossip shows speculated about her past. Bloggers dug up old photographs from her social media pages. She stopped leaving the house except for work, afraid of being recognized. Even some of the staff, who had once smiled warmly, now looked at her with pity or thinly veiled disdain. One afternoon, while she was cleaning the upstairs study, the head housekeeper, Mrs. Lane, closed the door behind her. "Emma," she said softly, "I've been told to let you go." Emma froze. "What?" Mrs. Lane sighed, guilt clouding her eyes. "The decision came from Mrs. Westwood. She called this morning. She said your presence is creating tension in the household." "I'm sorry, dear." Emma's knees nearly gave out. "Please don't. Mrs. Lane, this is my only income. I send money to my mother every month." "I know," the older woman whispered. "I tried to talk her out of it, but she was furious." By the time Gabriel returned home, Emma's belongings were already packed. He found her standing in the foyer with her suitcase beside her, looking small against the grand staircase. "Where are you going?" he demanded. She turned slowly, her face pale but calm. "Your mother fired me. I didn't want to cause more problems for you. I think it's better if I leave." "No," he said, stepping forward. "You're not leaving." "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The whole world is talking about us. Your company is under pressure. Your mother hates me. And now your employees whisper when I walk by, I don't want to ruin your life." He cupped her face in his hands. "You are my life, Emma. Don't you understand that?" She shook her head slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Love isn't supposed to destroy everything around it." "Then let's rebuild together," he pleaded. "We'll start over. Move somewhere else. I don't care about money or status." But Emma stepped back, her resolve hardening even as her heart shattered. "You think love is enough to protect us from people like your mother, from the media, from the world you belong to? It isn't. I need time to breathe, time to find myself again." He reached for her, but she turned away. "Please don't follow me," she whispered. "If this love is real, it will survive even when we're apart." She left that evening, taking only her suitcase and a small envelope of savings. Gabriel watched from the doorway as the taxi carried her away, the taillights glowing red in the misty night. For the first time in years, the mansion felt truly empty. Emma moved into a modest apartment in the Mission District, close to where her mother lived. The neighborhood was noisy, full of life, children playing, vendors shouting, but inside her small room, silence hung like a weight. She took a temporary job at a local cafe, determined to rebuild her life piece by piece. She refused Gabriel's offers of help, returning his calls only to assure him she was fine. Every night, though, she cried quietly, clutching the pillow that still smelled faintly of his cologne. At the cafe, she found solace in small things. The rhythm of the espresso machine, the hum of conversation, the kindness of strangers who didn't know her past. She enrolled again in her business courses, pouring herself into studies. Each assignment, each exam, was a step toward independence, a silent promise to herself that she would not be defined by pity or scandal. Months passed. Winter softened into spring. The tabloids moved on to new gossip, new scandals, and the city forgot her name. But Gabriel did not forget. He called every week, sometimes leaving voicemails that went unanswered. He sent letters, carefully worded, full of warmth, never demanding. "I'm proud of you," one read. "I hope you're eating well." Another simply said, "I miss you more than words can say." One Sunday afternoon, as she was closing the cafe, she turned and found Gabriel standing in the doorway. He looked thinner, older, but his eyes were still the same, gentle, full of quiet strength. "Gabriel," she breathed, her heart racing. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he said softly. "It's been 6 months." She swallowed hard, torn between longing and fear. "You shouldn't be here. People will talk again." "Let them," he said, smiling faintly. "They'll talk no matter what we do. But I can't live my life according to their noise." She looked at him for a long moment. "How's your mother?" "She still refuses to see me," he admitted. "She thinks I've lost my mind. But I've gained peace. I sold part of the company. I started a foundation for education in low-income communities. It's what we talked about, remember?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You actually did it." "I did," he said. "And I want you to help me run it." She blinked, stunned. "Me?" "Yes. You know this work better than anyone. You've lived it." He reached out, holding her gaze. I don't care what the world says, Emma. I still believe in you. In us. Her heart wavered. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to avoid the pain she had endured. Yet standing before him, she realized that love, real love, wasn't about comfort. It was about growth, about courage. "If I say yes," she whispered, "we do it on my terms. Equal partners." "Always," he said, smiling through tears. And just like that, the distance between them dissolved. The following months became a season of rebirth. Together, they worked tirelessly on the Westwood Foundation for Education, transforming abandoned schools into centers for digital learning. Emma handled logistics, outreach, and budgeting with the same precision she once used to polish marble floors. Her dedication impressed donors, journalists, and even some of Gabriel's critics. Slowly, respect replaced judgment. But one person remained unmoved: Patricia. She watched from a distance, bitter and unwilling to forgive. When she fell ill later that year, Gabriel visited her at the hospital, Emma waiting outside the room. Patricia's voice was weak, but her pride remained. "She's still with you, isn't she?" "Yes," Gabriel said quietly. "And she's the best thing that ever happened to me." Patricia looked away, her eyes glistening. "I spent my life building walls to protect you. Maybe I built them too high." He took her hand. "You can still take them down, Mother." She said nothing, but her grip tightened. When Gabriel stepped outside, Emma rose from her chair, nervous but determined. "May I see her?" He nodded. Inside, Patricia regarded her coldly. "You've caused quite a storm, Miss Torres." Emma met her gaze with calm respect. "Sometimes storms are what clear the air, Mrs. Westwood." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. The proud mother, the determined woman. Then, almost imperceptibly, Patricia's expression softened. "You love him." "I do," Emma said simply, "but I never wanted to take him from you. I just wanted him to be happy." Patricia closed her eyes, her voice a whisper. "He is. Maybe that's what matters most." When Emma stepped out, tears blurred her vision. Gabriel stood waiting, and she nodded silently. Something had shifted. A door, at last, cracked open. A year later, the foundation celebrated its first anniversary. The ballroom of a downtown hotel was filled with teachers, donors, and hundreds of children whose lives had changed because of their work. Emma stood at the podium, her heart pounding as she addressed the crowd. "I used to think life was something that happened to people like me," she said, her voice steady. "That dreams were for others, people with connections, money, privilege. But I learned that sometimes the only thing standing between you and your dream is the courage to believe you deserve it. I was a housekeeper once. Today I help build schools. Not because I'm extraordinary, but because someone believed I could be more." The audience rose in applause. Gabriel, standing at the back, wiped a tear from his eye. After the event, as the lights dimmed and the guests departed, Emma stepped outside to the terrace overlooking the bay. Gabriel joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist. The city shimmered below, the same city where they had once been broken and lost. "Do you remember that first night?" he murmured. "How could I forget?" she said, smiling softly. "It changed everything." He kissed her forehead. "It did." "But you changed me, Emma. You taught me that love isn't about saving someone, it's about growing together." She turned in his arms, looking into his eyes. "And you taught me that love doesn't need permission from the world to be real." They stood there in silence, the breeze carrying the distant sound of laughter and music. Somewhere in that moment, Emma realized that the pain, the scandal, the loneliness, it had all been part of the journey that brought them here. When Gabriel took her hand and slipped a small velvet box into her palm, her breath caught. Inside was a simple ring, elegant and timeless. "I don't want to wait for the world's approval anymore," he said softly. "Marry me, Emma." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes." In that moment, the lights of the city seemed to burn brighter, as if the universe itself had been waiting for their answer. 6 months later, their wedding was small and intimate, held in the garden of the same mansion where they had first met. Patricia attended, walking slowly down the path with the help of a cane. When the ceremony ended, she approached Emma, her voice gentle for the first time. "Welcome to the family, my dear, and thank you for giving my son back his smile." Emma smiled through tears. "Thank you for giving me a chance." As music filled the evening air and guests raised their glasses, Gabriel and Emma danced under a canopy of lights. The stars shimmered above, and for the first time, everything felt right. Their journey had been born from courage, tested by fire, and redeemed by forgiveness. The Maid and the Millionaire, two souls from different worlds, had proved that love, when anchored in respect and faith, could rise above every barrier. That night, as they stood on the terrace watching the horizon glow with the first light of dawn, Emma whispered, "Do you think the world will ever stop judging us?" Gabriel smiled. "Maybe, but by then we'll be too busy living our own story to notice." And with that, he kissed her, the sunrise painting them in gold, the past behind them, the future wide open, their love unshakable. The separation and the promise, the first year of marriage felt like a dream they had both fought too hard to win. The mansion that had once felt cold and empty now brimmed with warmth and laughter. Emma filled every corner with touches of life. Fresh flowers in the hall, framed photos of charity projects, and the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls that she baked on weekends. Gabriel, though busier than ever, made sure to be home in time for dinner. Their quiet evenings filled with laughter, soft music, and plans for the foundation's next big expansion. But love, even when built on the strongest foundation, is not immune to pressure. The world they lived in had changed, and so had they. Gabriel's company had merged with a global tech conglomerate, and he was suddenly thrust back into boardrooms, interviews, and business trips that took him halfway across the world. Emma understood. She knew ambition had always been a part of who he was. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the distance between them began to stretch. At first, it was just missed dinners. Then, unanswered messages. She would wait by the window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, staring at the driveway where his car should have been hours ago. Sometimes he came home past midnight, tired, distracted, his phone buzzing with endless calls. He would smile, hold her close, whisper that everything was fine. But his eyes, his beautiful, kind eyes, had begun to dim with exhaustion. Emma never complained. She focused on the foundation, expanding its reach to other states, building partnerships with universities, and creating scholarships for young women from low-income families. Every success made her proud, but she couldn't ignore the quiet ache that grew in her chest, the loneliness that came from loving someone who was always moving, always one step ahead. One evening, as she reviewed reports in her office, her phone buzzed with a message from Gabriel. Flight delayed again. "Be home tomorrow night." "I'm sorry, love." She typed back, "It's okay. I'll wait." But when she set the phone down, her heart felt heavy. She looked around the empty house, the same house where she had once dreamed of happiness, and realized how quiet it had become again. Her mother, Maria, noticed the change. During Sunday dinners, she would watch Emma push food around her plate and finally say, "Mihija, marriage isn't about losing yourself to someone else's world. It's about building one together." Emma smiled faintly. "We're just busy right now." Maria took her daughter's hand, squeezing it gently. "Love needs time, Emma. Even the strongest heart can't survive on memories alone." That night, Emma sat on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. She remembered the nights she used to stand here waiting for him before they were married. The excitement, the hope. But now, waiting felt like a wound that never healed. When her phone rang, she grabbed it quickly, her heart leaping. "Gabriel?" she said softly. But the voice on the other end wasn't his assistant or colleague. It was his mother, Patricia. "Emma," came the familiar, carefully measured tone. "We need to talk." Emma straightened. "Mrs. Westwood, is everything all right?" "I'm not sure," Patricia replied. "Gabriel hasn't been himself lately. He's drowning in work, refusing to slow down. And you seem to be pretending nothing's wrong. Emma's throat tightened. He's just busy. This merger is destroying him, Patricia interrupted. I may not have liked how your relationship started, but I can see you love him. If you do, then you need to pull him back before he loses himself. It was strange, hearing concern from a woman who once despised her. But there was truth in Patricia's words. Emma realized she had been waiting for Gabriel to fix things, when perhaps she needed to fight for them herself. The next day, she flew to Singapore, where Gabriel's company was hosting an investor summit. She didn't tell him she was coming. She wanted to surprise him, or maybe to remind him what home felt like. When she arrived at the hotel, she spotted him across the lobby. He was surrounded by executives, his tailored suit perfect, his posture confident. Yet there was a hollowness in his smile, a fatigue that went deeper than lack of sleep. When his eyes finally met hers, he froze. For a moment, the noise around them faded, and all he saw was her. Emma, he breathed, walking toward her. What are you doing here? I came to see my husband, she said softly, forcing a smile. Do I need a reason for that? His eyes softened with guilt. I'm sorry. I've been terrible lately. You've been busy, she said gently, but busy can't last forever. That evening, they walked along the harbor, the lights of the city reflecting in the water. For the first time in months, they talked, really talked. She told him how she felt invisible, how the silence at home had become unbearable. He listened quietly, taking her hand. I thought I was doing this for us, he said. For our future. I never asked for more success, Gabriel, she replied. I asked for you. Those words hit him like a revelation. That night, he canceled his meetings and spent the evening with her, laughing, remembering who they used to be. When morning came, he promised things would change, but promises, like fragile glass, can break under too much weight. A few weeks later, Gabriel's company faced a crisis, a massive data breach that risked millions of users' information. The board demanded immediate action, the media erupted, and investors panicked. Overnight, Gabriel was pulled back into chaos. He worked 20-hour days, slept at the office, and shut the world out again. Emma tried to be patient, but every unanswered call, every empty night, began to feel like abandonment. She told herself it was temporary, that once the crisis passed, they would find their rhythm again. But months went by, and the distance between them became more than physical. It became emotional. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, Gabriel walked in late, his tie undone, eyes red from exhaustion. He didn't even notice the candles she had lit or the meal she had spent hours cooking. Did you eat? She asked softly. I grabbed something at the office, he said absently, dropping his jacket on the chair. There's a board call in 10 minutes. She tried to smile, but her voice trembled. You haven't sat down with me in weeks. Emma, please, he sighed, rubbing his temples. Not now, her chest tightened. If not now, when? He looked at her, his face full of weariness rather than anger. I'm trying to hold everything together. Can you just trust me? Tears filled her eyes. I do trust you, Gabriel. But I need to know that we still matter. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed again. He hesitated, then took the call. Emma stood there frozen, watching as he turned away, speaking to someone about deadlines and damage control, and in that moment, she realized he was slipping away, not because he stopped loving her, but because he didn't know how to slow down. That night, she packed a small bag and left a note on his desk. I love you, but I need to find myself again before I lose who I am trying to hold on to you. Emma moved back to her mother's house, this time not in shame or heartbreak, but in quiet reflection. She spent her mornings volunteering at local schools, teaching young women financial literacy and self-confidence. The work healed her, little by little. Months passed before Gabriel showed up at her door. He looked different, thinner, quieter, his arrogance replaced by humility. Emma, he said softly, you were right. I lost myself. She looked at him, her heart breaking all over again. And did you find what you were looking for? I found out that success means nothing if I come home to silence, he said. I don't want to win the world and lose us. Tears welled in her eyes. It's not about losing or winning, Gabriel. It's about remembering why we started. He took a deep breath. I've stepped down as CEO. I've put someone else in charge. I want to build something simpler, something that gives life, not just consumes it. She blinked in disbelief. You did that? He nodded. Because I made you a promise that we'd live a life worth living together. And then, for the first time in nearly a year, she smiled through her tears. Then let's start again. They moved to a small house by the coast, not as a millionaire and his maid, not as CEO and foundation director, but as two people rediscovering what love meant when everything else was stripped away. They grew a small garden, cooked together, laughed again. Every morning, Gabriel made coffee while Emma watched the sunrise. They spoke about their plans not in terms of profits or projects, but in terms of purpose, helping, teaching, healing. They launched a new initiative from their foundation, the Promise Program, offering mentorship and free education for those who had once felt unseen, just like Emma once did. Their days were simple but filled with meaning. And every time Gabriel looked at her, the woman who had once wiped down his kitchen counters, who had turned his mansion into a home, who had left him to find herself only to return stronger, he felt gratitude deeper than words. One evening, as the tide rolled in and the sky turned gold, Gabriel wrapped his arms around her and whispered, "You saved me, Emma." She smiled softly. "No, Gabriel. We saved each other." They stood there until the sun dipped below the horizon, the sound of waves mingling with the beating of their hearts. And though life had tested them, broken them, and rebuilt them, their love had endured, not as a fairy tale, but as something real, earned, and unshakable. Because true love is not proven in easy days. It's forged in the nights when you almost give up, but choose to hold on anyway. And as the stars began to appear, Emma whispered the words that had started it all years ago. One night changed everything. Gabriel smiled, pressing his forehead against hers. Yes, he said softly, and every night since has made it worth it. The miracle they never expected. The house by the coast soon became a place of quiet healing. The air there smelled of salt and wildflowers. The days moved slowly, and the world beyond their small stretch of shoreline seemed far away. For Gabriel and Emma, this was peace, a peace they had earned after years of storms. They spent mornings walking barefoot along the beach, afternoons tending the small vegetable garden behind the house, and evenings cooking together with music playing softly in the background. It wasn't a millionaire's life anymore, but it was a life that finally felt whole. Sometimes, when the wind carried the sound of laughter from children playing near the dunes, Emma would pause, a wistful smile touching her lips. Gabriel noticed it more than once. One night, as they watched the sunset from the porch, he asked gently, "Do you ever wish we had a child?" Emma's eyes softened. Sometimes. But maybe it's not meant for us. Maybe our purpose is to help others build their future instead. Gabriel turned toward her, his expression tender. If that's what destiny wants, I can live with that. As long as I have you. But destiny had its own plans, and it rarely followed expectations. A few months later, Emma began feeling unusually tired. At first, she blamed it on long hours at the Foundation's community center, where she taught classes 3 times a week. But soon, even simple tasks left her breathless. Gabriel grew worried. "You should see a doctor," he insisted. She laughed softly, brushing it off. "It's just the sea air, making me lazy." When she finally went for a checkup, neither of them were prepared for what they heard. The doctor looked at her chart, then at Emma with gentle seriousness. "You're pregnant." For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. "Pregnant?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. The doctor smiled. 8 weeks along. It's a surprise, I know, but everything looks good so far. You'll need rest and care, especially given your age." Emma left the clinic in a daze, sunlight blinding her eyes. She sat in the car for several minutes before she could even call Gabriel. When he answered, his voice filled with warmth and curiosity. "Hey, love. How did it go?" She laughed through tears. "You might want to sit down." When she told him, silence followed. Then the sound of his breath catching, breaking into laughter, disbelief, and joy all at once.
Emma, are you serious?
We're going to have a baby? Yes, she whispered, smiling. We're going to be parents. That night, he held her for hours, his hand resting gently over her stomach. After everything we've lost, he murmured, life still finds us. From that day, every sunrise carried new meaning. Gabriel repainted the small room next to their bedroom, turning it into a nursery with soft white walls and hand-carved shelves. Emma spent her days planning, reading parenting books, and writing letters to the baby she had yet to meet. Small notes about hope, courage, and love. You were born from faith, one letter said, and we will love you with everything we are. But as months passed, Emma's pregnancy grew difficult. She was older now, and complications began to appear. Swelling, dizziness, moments where her heart raced uncontrollably. Her doctor advised complete rest. Gabriel tried to stay calm, but every doctor's appointment left him terrified. He started working from home again, refusing to leave her side. One night, he found her sitting by the window, tears in her eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if something happens to the baby or to me?" He knelt beside her, taking her trembling hands in his. "Nothing will happen. We've survived worse than fear, Emma. We've survived the world's judgment, my mother's anger, and our own mistakes. We'll survive this too," she smiled weakly. "You always make me believe in miracles." "That's because you are one," he said. On a stormy night in early December, Emma went into labor, 6 weeks early. The drive to the hospital was a blur of rain and flashing lights. Gabriel gripped her hand the entire way, whispering encouragement even as panic clawed at his chest. Hours passed. The hallway outside the delivery room felt endless, echoing with the beeping of machines and the faint cries of newborns. Finally, a nurse came out smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Westwood, you have a baby girl." He ran inside, his heart pounding. Emma lay pale but smiling, tears streaming down her face. In her arms was the tiniest bundle he had ever seen. Fragile, perfect, her tiny fingers curling around Emma's thumb. "She's so small," Emma whispered. Gabriel leaned close, brushing a kiss over her forehead. "She's perfect, just like her mother." They named her Grace, because, as Emma said, she was proof that grace still existed, even after pain. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and quiet wonder. Grace had to stay in an incubator for a while, but every day she grew stronger. Gabriel often stood by the glass, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, whispering promises she couldn't yet hear. "I'll give you the world," he'd say softly. "But more than that, I'll teach you how to live with heart." Emma recovered slowly. Her body was weak, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. Holding Grace for the first time outside the incubator felt like holding the universe, fragile, precious, infinite. "She's everything I never knew I wanted," she told Gabriel one morning, tears shining in her eyes. Life settled into a new rhythm. Their once quiet home now echoed with laughter, tiny cries, and lullabies hummed late into the night. Patricia visited a month later, walking hesitantly through the door. When she saw her granddaughter, something inside her melted. She reached out with trembling hands. "May I?" she asked. Emma smiled, handing Grace over. Patricia looked down at the baby's face, soft cheeks, curious eyes, and whispered, "She looks just like you, Gabriel." Then she turned to Emma, her voice breaking. "Thank you for giving our family back its heart." That day, years of tension dissolved in a single embrace. The foundation flourished in the months that followed. Emma became a voice for mothers balancing work and family, launching programs for women who had once been overlooked. She often brought Grace with her to community events, the baby gurgling happily in her arms as cameras flashed. People saw not a scandal anymore, but a symbol, proof that love and perseverance could turn shame into strength. But life, unpredictable as ever, had one more test to give. When Grace was almost 2, Gabriel began complaining of headaches. He dismissed them as stress, but one evening during dinner, he suddenly collapsed. Emma's screams shattered the silence as she rushed to his side. The hospital lights, once symbols of new life, now became witnesses of fear. The diagnosis came quickly: a small brain aneurysm, treatable but dangerous. Surgery was required. Emma sat beside him, her hands shaking. "You're going to be fine," she said, forcing the words past her trembling lips. He smiled weakly. "If anything happens—" "Don't!" she cut him off. "Nothing will happen. I just need you to know," he whispered. "You've already given me everything I ever wanted. Love, peace, and a daughter who carries both our hearts." Tears spilled from her eyes as she gripped his hand. "Then you fight, Gabriel. You promised me a lifetime, and I'm not done loving you yet." The surgery lasted 6 hours. Every minute felt like an eternity. Emma paced the hallway, clutching Grace's blanket, praying silently. When the surgeon finally appeared, his tired smile said everything. "He's stable. He made it." Emma broke down, sobbing in relief. When Gabriel woke, she was there holding his hand. "You scared me," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Guess we still have a few more miracles left in us." Recovery was slow, but it brought them even closer. Gabriel, once defined by ambition, now measured life not by achievements, but by moments. Grace's laughter, Emma's smile, the quiet sound of waves outside their window. On the anniversary of Grace's birth, they held a small celebration at the beach. Friends, staff, and neighbors gathered, watching as Gabriel lifted his daughter into the air, her laughter echoing against the wind. Emma stood nearby, her heart full. As the sun dipped low, Gabriel turned to her. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. From a maid's dream to a family's miracle. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Everything we went through, every pain, every mistake, it all led us here." She smiled, leaning against him. "Then it was worth it." In that golden light, surrounded by love, they felt the universe exhale, as if every trial they had faced had been necessary to shape them into who they were now. Years passed. Grace grew into a curious, kind-hearted child who loved the sea and the stars. She often sat on Gabriel's lap, listening as he told her stories about courage and kindness. Emma would watch them from the doorway, realizing that the greatest legacy they could leave wasn't wealth or fame. It was love that healed, love that endured. One evening, after putting Grace to bed, Gabriel found Emma sitting by the window, gazing at the night sky. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She smiled softly. "About miracles. How they come when you least expect them, and how sometimes the biggest one is simply the chance to love and be loved back." He kissed her forehead, whispering, "Then we're living a miracle every day." As the waves whispered against the shore outside, and Grace's gentle breathing filled the quiet house, Emma realized something profound, that their story had never been about a maid and a millionaire. It had always been about two souls who refused to give up on each other, who dared to believe that love could rebuild even what the world tried to break. That night, as she fell asleep in Gabriel's arms, she whispered the words that had followed them through every storm, every silence, every dawn. That one night changed everything, and Gabriel, smiling in the darkness, answered as he always did. It changed everything, and it still does. The legacy of their love time has a way of softening even the sharpest memories. The mansion, the gossip, the scandal, all of it had long faded into something distant, almost unreal. What remained was the life they had built, steady, quiet, and beautiful in its imperfection. 10 years had passed since Grace's birth, and the Westwood family home by the coast had become a beacon of hope for hundreds of lives touched by their foundation. Every morning began with sunlight spilling across the garden, the scent of jasmine floating in the breeze, and Grace's laughter echoing through the halls. She was her mother's gentleness and her father's strength woven into one bright soul. She loved reading more than toys, and her favorite place was still the beach, where she built castles that washed away only to rebuild them again, a reflection, perhaps, of the resilience she had inherited. Emma often watched her from the porch, her heart full. She had grown wiser, her beauty quieter but deeper, the kind that came from peace rather than perfection. Her life had once been about survival. Now it was about meaning. Gabriel still teased her about working too much, though he had become just as guilty. Together, they had turned their private foundation into a nationwide movement. They didn't just build schools anymore. They built futures. One spring afternoon, Gabriel returned from a trip to Washington, exhausted but smiling. Emma was preparing tea in the kitchen when he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Guess what?" he murmured. She laughed softly. "If it's about work, it can wait until I finish stirring this." "It's not work," he said, grinning. "The President's office invited us to receive a National Humanitarian Award next month. For the foundation." She froze, the spoon clattering softly against the cup. "You're joking." "I'm not," he said, holding up the official letter. "They want us there, not just me. You, me, and Grace." Her eyes filled with tears. "After everything we went through. This," he kissed her cheek, "this is what comes when you live with purpose. When you refuse to give up." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, realizing that this, not money, not prestige, was what success truly looked like. The award ceremony was held in Washington, D.C., inside a grand marble hall filled with dignitaries, leaders, and philanthropists. As they entered, camera flashes lit up like starlight. Emma's hands trembled slightly, but Gabriel squeezed them gently. "Just breathe," he whispered. "You belong here." When their names were announced, the applause was thunderous. But what silenced the room was Emma's speech. She stepped up to the podium, the spotlight warm on her face, and spoke not as the wife of a millionaire, but as a woman who had once scrubbed floors and dreamed of something better. "I used to think success meant wealth," she began, her voice calm but strong. "But life taught me something different. Success isn't about what you have. It's about what you give. I stand here today not because I was lucky, but because someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That belief turned a maid into a dreamer into a builder, and a builder into a mother who teaches her daughter that love and kindness are the greatest currencies in the world." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, but Gabriel didn't see them. He saw only her, the woman who had once been afraid to speak her truth, now commanding the hearts of everyone in the room. Later that night, as they walked along the reflecting pool, Grace skipping ahead with her medal around her neck, Gabriel turned to Emma. "You were incredible," she smiled faintly. "We both were. But more than anything, I'm proud of what we've built. Not the foundation, but this." She gestured toward Grace. "And us." He nodded, emotion thick in his voice. "Our greatest creation." A few months later, life slowed again. They returned to the coast where the waves whispered familiar songs. But Gabriel began feeling unwell, small things at first, fatigue, chest pain, dizziness. He tried to hide it, but Emma noticed. "Something's wrong," she said one night, worry clouding her eyes. He brushed her hand. "It's just stress." "I'll get checked." He didn't, not immediately. He didn't want to worry her. But fate, as always, had its own timing. One evening, after tucking Grace into bed, Gabriel collapsed on the porch. The world blurred into flashing lights, sirens, and frantic prayers. When Emma reached the hospital, she refused to sit. "He's strong," she told the doctors. "He'll fight." Hours passed before they came out. The words heart failure and surgery blurred together. She clung to hope with trembling hands. "He's survived worse," she whispered to herself. "He'll survive this too." And he did. Barely. The recovery was long, painful, but it changed him. Lying in that hospital bed, watching Emma sleep in the chair beside him, he realized how fragile time really was. When he returned home weeks later, he looked at life with new eyes, softer, slower, more grateful. One morning, as they sat watching the sunrise, he reached for her hand. "I used to think that one night changed my life because I fell in love," he said quietly. "But now I know it changed my life because it taught me what love really is. Not passion or perfection, but patience, forgiveness, and faith." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. "We didn't just fall in love, Gabriel. We grew in love." He smiled faintly. "And I'd do it all again, even the hard parts. As Grace grew older, their story became her favorite bedtime tale. She never tired of hearing how her parents met, how her mother had once been the maid who dared to speak her heart, and her father the man who listened. Sometimes she would ask, "Mama, was Grandma Patricia really mean to you?" And Emma would laugh softly. "She just loved your father in her own way." Sometimes love looks like control before it learns to become care. By the time Grace turned 16, Patricia had passed away peacefully, leaving behind a letter addressed to Emma. "Thank you for proving me wrong. You didn't take my son away, you brought him home." Emma cried for hours when she read it. Forgiveness had taken years, but it had finally come full circle. Years rolled on, gentle but unstoppable. Gabriel's health slowly declined, though his spirit never dimmed. Even as his hair turned silver and his steps slowed, he still found joy in small things. Watching the sea with Emma, teaching Grace how to plant tomatoes, laughing at old memories. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they held a small dinner in their garden. Friends and family gathered under strings of lights, the sea breeze carrying laughter through the night. After the meal, Gabriel stood and raised a glass. "I've built companies, earned awards, traveled the world," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "But my greatest achievement is sitting right here. The woman who taught me humility, and the daughter who reminds me every day that love is legacy. Emma, you gave me everything I never knew I needed." Emma's eyes filled with tears as he reached for her hand. "You gave me more," she said softly. "You gave me a home, not a place, but a feeling." Everyone applauded, but in that moment, the world faded until only they existed. Two souls bound by time, trial, and tenderness. A few months later, one quiet autumn morning, Gabriel didn't wake up. He passed peacefully in his sleep, the sunrise spilling across his face like a final blessing. Emma found him sitting by the window, a book open on his lap, his expression calm, as if he had simply drifted into another dream. The pain that followed was indescribable. For days, the world blurred into flowers, condolences, and the sound of waves that felt too cruelly alive. But even in grief, Emma found strength in the love he had left behind. At the memorial, she stood before hundreds, friends, staff, students, and spoke with grace. "Gabriel Westwood taught me that love isn't measured in years, but in moments. He gave his life not to fame, but to people. And though his heart has stopped, his legacy still beats, in every child who learns because of him, in every woman who dares to dream because he believed in one." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the service, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma and Grace walked down to the beach together. The wind carried the scent of the ocean, the same ocean where everything had once begun. Grace looked up at her mother, her voice soft. "Do you think he can see us?" Emma smiled through tears. "I don't just think, I know. Love doesn't disappear, Grace, it changes form. It becomes the air we breathe, the warmth we feel, the courage we find when we think we can't go on." That night, after Grace fell asleep, Emma sat on the porch alone, watching the stars. She felt the ache of loss, but also an overwhelming sense of peace. Somewhere deep inside, she heard his voice, calm, loving, familiar. "You're not alone, Emma. You never will be." She closed her eyes, whispering back, "I know." 10 years later, the world knew her not as the maid who fell in love with a millionaire, but as Emma Torres Westwood, humanitarian, educator and founder of the Grace Initiative, named after their daughter. The foundation had expanded globally, providing education to millions of children across continents. At the grand opening of their first international school, Emma, now silver-haired but radiant, stood beside Grace, who had grown into a confident young woman. "Your father would be proud," Grace said quietly. Emma smiled, eyes glistening. "He is. Every time a child opens a book, he's here." As she stepped onto the stage to cut the ribbon, she looked up at the sky, the same shade of gold it had been the evening she first confessed her love. Her voice, soft but steady, carried through the crowd. 20 years ago, one night changed my life. I thought it was the night I fell in love, but I was wrong. It was the night I learned that love can build worlds, heal wounds, and change destinies. So, to everyone here, remember this. Never be afraid to speak your truth no matter where you start. Because one act of courage, one night of honesty, can change everything. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Grace hugged her tightly, and as Emma stood beneath the sunlight, her heart calm and full, she felt Gabriel's presence beside her, unseen, but felt in every breath, every heartbeat, every smile shared by the children their love had touched. She closed her eyes, whispering one last time to the wind, "Thank you for that one night." And from somewhere beyond the noise, she could almost hear his reply, carried softly by the sea breeze. It changed everything, forever.